Looking for the best opportunities in Perth property? Get the local area expertise you need from Momentum Wealth, WA's trusted property investment consultants. Market insights, advice and representation from award-winning buyers agents and REWA Hall of Fame inductees. Visit Momentum Wealth's website at momentumwealth.com.au to organise your obligation-free consultation today.
Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show with your host, Phil Tarrant.
Hi everyone, how you going? I hope you're well. Hope you've had a good weekend. My eyes and ears, the long arm of Smart Property Investment knows what's going on in real estate right across this great nation. And I've been chatting with a whole bunch of people late Saturday and over Sunday about what is a pretty mad market right now, including in that you might have seen him, Tom Panos. I was on the front page of the Herald Sun in Sydney on Sunday. Too much surprise. I don't know if you watch it on Facebook or the podcast, that What's Making Headlines that I do with Tom Panos every Thursday. And surprised to see him on the front cover. And he's auctioneering stuff like you wouldn't believe. $300,000 or $400,000 over reserves. So he reckons it's one of the hottest markets he's seen in nearly 3 decades. So we watch this on smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. Much like most property investors, you're keeping an eye on the market at the moment. Traffic on Smart Property Investment is off the charts. So there's a lot of activity, a lot of it driven by demand for property, but very little stock on market. So this is the whole supply and demand equation. If you listen to our last podcast I did with Paul Glossop, we spoke about that and some of these drivers and factors moving forward. Very different to what you would have thought at the start of COVID-19, when some of the major lenders were talking about 25-30+% drops in property price values. So we went into that podcast, go and tune into it. Really interesting stuff. But what it's shown us is that COVID-19 hasn't acted and behaved as what most people originally thought. What we now know is that Australia's done a pretty reasonable job in handling the pandemic. There hasn't been, in Melbourne, for example, a community infection for nearly 30 days, I think, or even more now. So things are going well, but that doesn't discount or dismiss the impact of COVID-19 on the national economy, the impact of COVID-19 on the global economy. And while Australia does pretty well, some parts of the world are still doing it pretty tough. So our thoughts are out there with them. But what I want to do with this particular podcast, 2 things. I wanted to introduce you into our new editor of Consumer Wealth here at Momentum Media, of which Smart Property Investment falls within, number 1. Number 2, I just really want to do a bit of rehash on those most popular COVID articles since it arrived on our shores late February, early March. So we're going to go into that. So firstly, the introduction. You're going to hear a lot more of her moving forward as we launch into 2021 on Smart Property Investment and help support you make more informed buying decisions, investing decisions over the year. Maya Garacha-Georgievich. Maya, how you going? You well?
I'm well, Phil. Thank you.
I was a bit nervous. I've known you for a couple of years now, but I've deliberately always just called you Maya because I was always a bit scared about getting your last name wrong. So how was my pronunciation?
It was really good, actually.
Yeah, really?
And honestly, I just go by Maya because it's way too complicated for me to keep track of.
It's good. Maya Garacha-Georgievich, my new colleague here at Smart Property Investment. I'm looking forward, Maya, to 2021 and beyond as we steer this great brand of Smart Property Investment into the future. And for those of you who may not have heard of Maya before, she's one of our key content leaders within Momentum Media, a really good backbone and grounding in the SME sector and accounting. So not too much of a step up, out, left, right, which way the compass it is to now help us supporting us on our consumer wealth products. So that's Smart Property Investment and Nestec. So this is where Australians create wealth. You must be pretty excited about it. Wealth creation.
Yes, I'm really excited. Yeah, that's right. And I'm pretty excited as well to learn some new things and create some wealth of my own, I guess.
This is it. Yeah. Well, I'm happy to report, Maya, that most people that work and have a relationship with Smart Property Investment or Nestec end up being investors of some sort.
That's why I've joined the team, Phil.
And pretty good investors. So it's one of the job perks you have here. Yeah, the downside is that you get to work with me. But anyway, we'll work with that, no doubt. But even on, as you transition into and evolve into the wealth side of things, you've had an interesting COVID-19 this year working with the ATO in many ways and some of the other regulatory bodies supporting SMEs through that market. That's been interesting times.
Yeah, it has really. We've done a number of webcasts and podcasts and stories with the ATO and Kate Carnell, the Small Business Ombudsman, and it's been a really tough time for small businesses across Australia during this COVID-19 pandemic, and obviously everything that's sort of happened has hit them first. So yeah, it's been a very, very interesting year and one we can't wait to finish finally.
I reckon everyone's happy to get 2020 behind us, but a lot of SMEs, some SMEs have done well through COVID-19, depending really what industry sector. If you're in travel and hospitality, it's been a pretty tough year. If you're in the business of hand sanitizers,
exactly,
you've had a pretty good year, right?
Yeah.
So a bit of horses for courses, but a lot of property investors are SME business owners. So, they have the old adage, Maya, of make your money in business and park it in property. So you find that most property investors, a lot of property investors do invest in property and they leverage and support their accountants from it. But no doubt we can get into that in other podcast episodes moving forward. So today, Maya, we're going to do the 10 most popular COVID stories, articles, content, piece of content over 2020. So essentially starting from February to where we are right now at the start of December. And this is very much, we've based this on how many people engage with it, looked at it, listened to it, whatever. So we'll start at number 10 and we'll end up at number 1. And I'm happy where number 1 is. I know where number 1 is because I've got the list here, Maya, that you put together. And I'm part of that. So that actually makes me quite chuffed. Maybe it's a bit sensationalised. But anyway, so let's start at number 10, Maya. So the story is top 5 rental markets hit hardest by COVID-19. This story is from the 1st of May, Maya.
Yes.
And it says, new research has offered insight into the rental markets that are being most and least impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. This is pretty consistent. People love top 5 lists. Where do I sit within it? What's happening? What does it mean? And we're probably going to do a lot more of this stuff moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. I think people, especially sort of in May when everyone was wondering how the COVID crisis was going to unfold. So this was one of the major stories, obviously, because at the time the Australian rental market was already pretty weak. So this story sort of predicted some of the new challenges ahead and sort of made some, I think we have a top 5 hardest hit rental markets list here. So people were keen to see where it was that, COVID was striking the toughest in Australia.
Everyone was scared. This is at the same time when the banks were releasing some pretty dire predictions. Go and check it out. Just search top 5 rental markets hit hardest by COVID-19. It also connected in, a lot of people were concerned about the value of their properties during COVID, but if you remember back to this period of time, April, May, when there's these moratoriums on being able to remove people from your investment property. So people going, nah, can't afford it, but you can't chuck me out. So people were really worried about rental markets and the yield on their portfolio. So good story. Number 9, Maya, this sort of falls into your wheelhouse here. Tax tips for property investors affected by COVID-19. This is from the 14th of May. So obviously gearing up towards 30 June and tax time. And the piece here, this is... go and check it out. It says, while tax isn't necessarily on people's minds at the moment, Adam O'Grady, he's the Assistant Commissioner from the ATO, advised that the ATO has been working hard to provide plenty of investors with information and answers to their questions to help them understand how COVID-19 and government legislative changes may affect their rental income and deduction. So this is pretty much the ATO, I reckon, coming out, Maya. We've had senior people in the ATO on the Smart Property Investment Show. We like to have them on. ATO is a very important part of the ecosystem when it comes to property investment. This is pretty much the ATO going, just because there's COVID-19, that doesn't mean that you can be a bit sloppy in how you choose to do the tax on your investment properties.
Exactly, yeah. And I think May was when sort of the government, Scott Morrison and the ATO and everyone else was coming out with a lot of sort of statements, a lot of different packages. So this is sort of the ATO going through what's available to property investors and then also to renters in terms of sort of coming to an agreement and finding a way through this crisis. So, so basically it says, your tenants can't stop paying rent or paying less rent. They have to sort of negotiate with you and work with you and that sort of thing. Yeah, some tips there for property owners.
It's good guidance from the ATO. And remember, irrespective of what's happening in the markets, you have your responsibilities and accountabilities for the tax component of your investment property. So you got to be right across that. And you have any questions, there is a lot of really good accountants out there that can help you out with that. 8th most popular piece of content, COVID-19 stories. And maybe this is going to be it. Maybe there's not going to be any more COVID stories still left to go. But, considering what I mentioned there on property going berserk in some markets, a lot of that is COVID driven. But this is from a webcast, so a live stream. This is on smartpropertyinvestment.com. You go and check it out. Brisbane off the back of COVID-19 on June the 16th. A little abstract here. COVID-19 has featured much in the commentaries on Sydney and Melbourne's property markets, but the same can't be said for another East Coast capital. Join host Phil Tarrant and Melinda Jennison as the pair break down the Brisbane market from the worst of the pandemic to now. Utilising over 2 decades worth of investment, construction and development experience, Maya operating in the Sunshine State, the Managing Director of Streamline Properties will reveal how property headlines on the wider Australia differ to the trends, opportunities, challenges that have come to the fore in Brisbane. This was really good. This was really popular. I remember recording this as a live broadcast, and you're a big live broadcaster, live streamer, so you're going to see more of you out there doing property stuff. But Melinda Jennison's a great operator. She's from Streamline Property Buyers. I also have a podcast coming up with her, so stand by. That'll happen before Christmas. And we sat there and just went, what's going on in Brisbane? And Brisbane always is pretty popular.
Yeah, a lot of people tuned in. There's actually quite a number of questions that came in for you and Melinda as well. So people just sort of asking, what are the hot spots? What should we be doing? Should we be selling our property? Should we be buying new properties? And yes, it's very interesting to see that it was given it was just a sort of webcast focused on Brisbane.
Well, Brisbane's going, I think it's going to go berserk there. A lot of the information commentary coming out of the property demographers and property data providers right now are predicting sort of 5, 9, 10+% growth in Brisbane. And there's a lot of investors, myself included, Maya's been sitting around for ages waiting for something to happen in Brisbane. So now may be that time. But tune in to that podcast I'll be doing with Melinda Jennison probably in about 2 weeks' time. And we're going to get stuck into Brisbane. And whenever we put Brisbane in the headline, it gets heaps of traffic. So Maya, we're going to go to number 7, but we'll go to a break beforehand. Back in a moment.
Whether you're an avid property investor or about to buy your first property, why do it alone when you could partner with Australia's best buyer's agent, Director of Pure Property Investment, Property Investment Professionals of Australia board member and REB Buyer's Agent of the Year, Paul Glossop, can take your portfolio to the next level. Get in touch today to discuss your investment goals. Get one-on-one insight from Paul Glossop. And for the first 100 people, this service is completely free. Head to purepropertyinvestment.com today to schedule your consult with Paul Glossop directly.
Welcome back, everyone. Phil Tarrant, host of the Smart Property Investment Show with Maya Garacha-Georgievich, my new colleague here working across our consumer wealth products at Momentum Media. Really excited about steering and driving smart property investment with Maya over 2021. The 7th most popular COVID-19 story for 2020. Strategies to help your tenant if they are affected by COVID-19. So again, a tenant-based story. Abstract, Maya. Many businesses over the next few months will be forced to shut their doors to slow the spread of COVID-19. The important thing for landlords to remember is this is a short-term problem and we need to communicate and work with our tenants to help them get through this tough period. 31st of March, so pretty early on. And Scott O'Neill will be talking as much about commercial properties here as well as residential stuff. And for a lot of SME business owners, Maya, from the work that you've been doing, a lot of them just had revenue turned off completely, and they've got their accountabilities for paying rent, but they got no money coming to the door. So a lot of commercial landlords, it was mandated by the government that actually had to negotiate with their tenant and work out some sort of resolution.
And there was a lot of trouble there, obviously, because it was just left sort of to the tenant and the landlord to negotiate things. So we saw some shopping centres sort of kicking out their tenants and, there was a lot of trouble there. And obviously this being March, this was, I think, just after we sort of entered lockdown across Australia. So it was a very uncertain time for everyone and, businesses had to shut up shop literally overnight. And, if you have no revenue coming in, as you said, then obviously you can't sort of meet or, your bills and pay your rent. And so it was a very hard time. So this article here written by Scott sort of gives, tips for how to sort of negotiate that, how rent deferrals work, how rent relief works and sort of push back and where you have to refer to government incentives as well. Yeah, so very interesting story there for that time.
Yeah, there's remember to check out the podcast I do with Scott, Inside Commercial Property. Really good if you want to keep engaged and connected with all things commercial, and that's been really popular and will be moving forward. So for those of you investing in commercial, thinking about investing in commercial, operates differently to residential properties. So go and check that out. Number 6, my most popular COVID stories 2020. This is a blog written by David Hancock from the 13th of May, and he asked which rental markets will be most affected by the fallout of COVID-19. Again, another rental story. Most commentators predicting that rent will drop in the coming months due to less tenant demand and more supply. according to Domain figures, the number of rentals hitting the market was up 18% in early April compared with the same period last year. So this will apply across all rental markets and which rental markets were most effective. They're a really good piece, this. Go and have a look at this. And again, property data, is a big driver of commentary on smart property investment. We'll have a lot more of that moving forward, won't we, Maya?
Yeah, definitely. And I think with this story, and we're going back to sort of rental markets, and it seems that was the most popular sort of theme during that COVID period. Everyone was wondering what was going on and, how the pandemic was going to affect the rental market. So in this piece, I think David looks a little bit at the tourist hotspots. So obviously back in May, Sydney wasn't seeing any tourism. So, typically one of Australia's strongest rental markets. So the area was experiencing an oversupply, David says. And then obviously the impact of international students on specific rental markets, that was a big one as well, because we didn't have, 100,000 international students currently enrolled in Australia and they weren't able to enter Australia. So that was a major problem.
Yeah, and that's been one of the biggest alarms for property investors is without all these students coming in here, what does it mean for rents? And there's certain areas have been impacted by it. Most areas haven't. It just depends if they have a big student population. That'll be a trend you see moving forward. But the government's trying to get, the government being federal government, but state-based governments as well, trying to get students back in there because they are big economic drivers, both the university system but everything else, including property. So number 5, fifth most popular COVID story, property market set to soar post-COVID. This was from May the 18th. So May is a pretty popular time, Maya, and I'll read out the abstract here. Investors are being reminded that the pain in the property market will be short-lived, with property prices expected to bounce back post-pandemic. Research conducted by Pippa chairman Peter Kalizos analysed annual median house prices in index data for 7 consecutive years, including the start of each recession and economic downturn from 1973 to the GFC. The data found that 5 years after each of the recessions or economic downturns over that time period, capital city prices saw a significant increase. I did a podcast by about 3 weeks ago with Peter, and we had a really good chat about this, and I recommend everyone go and have a listen to that because pretty interesting stuff. We'll get smack bang into number 4 while we're on a roll here, Maya. This is a podcast on smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. Top 5 tips for property investors during COVID-19. Founder and director of Cohen Handler, Simon Cohen, has seen discounts in the current buying market of up to 30%, with sellers and real estate agents motivated to do deals. In this episode of the Smart Property Investment Show, co-host of the Reason podcast joins host Phil Tarrant to share how the current market is a goldmine opportunity for buyers. Simon addresses how the COVID-19 pandemic has altered the property market, whether you should be chasing yield or capital growth in the current climate, and why he believes that smart investors should be using this time for their advantage. So this is the 9th of April when there's a lot of fear in the market and a lot of people didn't know what's going on. So a lot of people just stopped what they were doing. So you see a lot of demand come out of the market, and there's still some motivated sellers to sell. So I think some people during probably a magic window of 3 to 4 months did pretty well in property, but I think that is long gone in terms of trying to spot bargains, Maya.
And I think this is just interesting to go back and listen to, just to see what the sort of environment and what the thought was behind, property investing in April, because the environment was quite different to what it is now, isn't it? Wasn't it, Phil, in terms of sort of the uncertainty at the time, 9th of April, things were still quite uncertain. We were still in lockdown, and, looking around today, things are a little bit different. So it would be good to just see,
Well, back in April, by memory, I was the only person in the office probably for quite some time. And people weren't leaving their houses. And this was like when we were actually in lockdown, I think stage 3 here in how
interesting
things
to
change.
Go back and reflect.
How things change. And it's good because we've got sort of like a narrative on these podcasts for how it's all worked. And we can go back and reflect on that. But the next story, so 3 to go, but we're going to go break before I'm back in a moment.
Are low interest rates impacting on your investment returns? It's time to rethink. Rethink Investing creates wealth for clients through the strategic purchase of positively geared, high cash flow commercial property. Industrial properties, retail assets, or office spaces can be a smart investment option that produces significant and long-term return on investment. Rethink your investment options and look to commercial property. Learn more at rethinkinvesting.com.au. Rethink Investing, Australia's #1 commercial buyers agency.
Welcome back, everyone. Phil Tarrant here, co-host of the Smart Property Investment Show with Maya Garacha Georgievich, my colleague here, as we navigate 2020 COVID, most popular COVID articles over this period of time. What has been 10 months of madness. Number 3, third most popular story, capital markets before and after COVID. Markets across Australia are lifted in the first 3 months of 2020, but could struggle to maintain momentum throughout COVID-19 pandemic, according to Domain. Property group Domain has released house pricing data across Australia's capital city for the 3 months of 31st of March, showing the nation's markets got off to a strong start for 2020 prior to the impact of COVID and the subsequent social distancing measures. So what we know, Myra, is that COVID-19 plunged Australia into recession, official recession, 2 quarters of negative growth. That was the March quarter and the June quarter. Yeah. Is that right?
And we're officially out of...
And now we're officially, because it's bounced back in September.
Yeah.
And property markets over that period of time have pretty much mirrored that. And some of the numbers coming out that I've seen recently is that we've had strong growth, well, at least growth across most capital markets in Australia. So this is the trials and tribulations of property, trying to match data and performance with buying decisions. And what you're seeing now, and I had a chat about this on that podcast with Paul Glossop the other day, go and tune into it, was around this sort of data deficit, as in people are making property investment decisions based on data they are releasing right now, which, let's be fair, is a couple of months old. So what you're actually seeing on the ground now is quite different to the data or the most recent data that you have. So you need to make sure you're blending data, which is good, with real-time sentiment drivers in whatever market you're operating right now. So just be careful of that. We have another blog here. Maya.
David's very popular.
David is very popular. David Hancock blog from the 23rd of June. So this is a month after the initial blog that he wrote. He said, what's in store for the property market post-COVID-19? While predictions for the property market for the next year or two have ranged from optimistic to dire, what many investors are wondering is what we can expect down the track once COVID-19 is mostly behind us, writes David Hancock. Will this current period of uncertainty have long-term impacts or create structural changes for the Australian property market? Who knows? We're still working through that.
But David was quite, I think, realistic in that he wasn't, in June we had commentators who were predicting sort of severe 20 to 30% drops in property markets. But David sort of, took a more realistic picture and sort of wasn't sort of all doom and gloom as some of the others were at the time. So, it's an interesting blog. You can go back and read that as well.
Go and check it out, June 23rd. So, Maya, the most popular COVID story, a piece of COVID content we had over 2020. It wasn't a news story. It wasn't a feature. It was actually a live stream. It was a webcast. The most visited piece of content we had, most popular piece of content we had over 2020. COVID-19 and the impact on property investing. Well, you'd expect that to pick it up.
It's not surprising. No. Yeah.
Everyone was wondering what's going on. It was from March as well. And I remember the person I did this with was in lockdown at the time who had a COVID test, so we had to do it over to Zoom. We couldn't do it face-to-face. Join Phil Tarrant, host of the Smart Property Investment Show, and Paul Glossop, founder and director of Pure Property Investment, as they discuss what the recent COVID-19 epidemic will have on property investing in Australia. Pure Property Investment's Paul Glossop will reveal the markets delivering cash flow, positive property supported by strong infrastructure developments. I remember this chat. It was pretty early on in COVID, and go and watch this. It's on smartpropertyinvestment.com. You just click on the webcast button, and I'd like to think that our commentary was pretty considered at that point in time, and we didn't get swept up in a lot of the doomsday merchants that were out at that period of time saying, hey, this is what I've been telling you about for years and years, that property in Australia is completely overpriced and the bubble's going to burst and it's going to drop by 40%. I think we were pretty considered with this. I don't know if you tuned into this, Maya.
Yeah, I did. And just looking at the comments as well, you can see that the uncertainty at the time was just at an all-time high, with people obviously asking questions around whether it's right time to buy, asking whether they should sell, what you're expecting. A lot of people sort of tuned in to hear from you and Paul and just ask for your expert advice on what they should do with their portfolio. So you can actually see that, it was quite scary at the time for people.
Yeah, it is. And look, I'm sure Paul Glossop's happy to give advice. I'm not. I'm just a journo trying to have a couple of conversations around property. I like to talk about the issues and not give any opinion on.
Well, you're very famous in the property market.
Well,
Phil,
really?
So.
Okay, for never having an opinion, I reckon. for never saying nothing that means anything in particular. But go and listen to that, because watch it. It's relevant today as what it was back then, and maybe we can get Paul back in and do a bit of a recap on that, and we can stress test and challenge those things. But lots of questions there, and we're going to do more webcasts into 2021. I enjoy doing them. They're really popular, live streaming with our audience. But there we go. There's the top 10 COVID-based stories for 2020.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And it's also interesting to see that sort of past June, there wasn't too much COVID-related material that people were sort of reading, because it was, obviously past June we sort of
Everyone's
left
COVIDed
lockdown
out.
and everyone was just, or just over COVID. I think that might also be the case.
Well, I think property investors are, considering the way the market's going right now.
Exactly,
But I think COVID is not behind us by any means. It's going to be there. And I still refer, when I talk about property markets, back to the GFC, right? So this is going to be a foundational moment in time for Australian property, COVID-19. They're going to be talking about it in 100 years' time, looking back to what happened when the next pandemic hits, much like the Spanish flu or influenza back in the 20s, 1920s after World War I, still looked at for lessons from history, and no doubt COVID-19 will be that. But keep at it, keep engaged, keep connected, keep watching Smart Property Investment, listening to Smart Property Investment podcast and the website smartpropertyinvestment.com.au, so know what's happening. And you're going to start seeing Maya's byline a lot of our commentary. So I look forward to that, Maya.
Yeah, I look forward to it too. So I look forward to sort of writing about the post-COVID period, hopefully.
This is it. You can start your journey in property post-COVID, which is not a bad place to be. So
exactly.
Join us on that journey.
I've joined at the right time.
You have. It's a great time to be in property. Remember to check out smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. If you're not yet subscribing to our daily morning newsletter, so you're the first to know what's going on in property, smartpropertyinvestment.com.au/subscribe, or social media. You can find us if that's where you'd like to get your info. Just find us Smart Property HQ. We'll see you again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs, and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.
Are you in the real estate industry? We're on the lookout for Australia's best agents, networks and property managers to enter the REB Awards 2021 with principal partner ListReady. The awards provide an invaluable opportunity to showcase your contribution to the industry, raise your profile on the national stage and celebrate your achievements with your peers. Nominations close in November. Start your nomination now at realestatebusinessawards.com.au/REB-awards.